Hello, everybody, and welcome to this structured sensory analysis video brought to you by the American Cider Association. My name is Gabe Cook. I'm called the Ciderologist, and I'm very proud to say that I'm a licensed educator for the Certified Cider Professional Program, the CCP program, which is precisely why you're watching this video, which is brought to you by the fantastic American Cider Association. This really is the best global cider education platform that there is. So you've made a very, very wise choice. Now, the purpose of this video is to have a little run through the structured sensory analysis, which forms a key and integral part of all of the learning of the level 1, the Certified Cider Guide. You are introduced to the concept of a structured sensory analysis. And then by the time that you move on to your Certified Pommelier and are working towards and undertaking your exam, undertaking a structured sensory analysis of 3 different ciders within that exam is an absolutely critical part of the assessment. And so this video is for those people who want to undertake the Certified Pommelier exam. This is a bit of practice, bit of a reminder of what is this process, how does it work, and why is it critical. But it can also be for people who are working in industry or just passionate enthusiasts alike. This is your opportunity to see how to have a full, critical, and sort of judgment-free assessment of the different sensory characteristics which can be found within any given cider. And that's the whole point, is that it is systematic. You're utilizing the same form every single time so that you can have a benchmark approach to assessing all ciders. Now, I would like to add that this is not necessarily the approach or the form that you should be using when you are enjoying a well-earned cider on a Friday evening after work. You don't need to get the pencil and the form out. You can sit and just enjoy that cider. But if you really want to get to grips with the drink, understand what is in here, what can I detect, in what quantities, in what proportions, and how is it interacting with other characteristics. If you want to go down that route, this is the way, this is the path, the structured sensory analysis. So we're going to run through this amazing, it's a fantastic assessment of the appearance, the way that the aromas present themselves, how it presents the cider in the palate, and the finish. What is the conclusion of your feeling towards any particular cider? So then, I think without further ado, we should get into third glassware is a kind of like an ISO glass like this, or anything that sort of curves in at the top so that it helps to sort of capture the aromatic potential. It makes it considerably easier to make that aromatic assessment. Where possible, you should also be undertaking the assessment in nice bright daylight. I don't have that currently, so I've got some nice bright lamplight. Hopefully that will see us through. It's also worth having either a white table or a white tablecloth, or, to be honest, a white piece of paper is what I'm going to be utilizing for this session. So, as well as your structured sensory analysis sheet, the American Cider Association, they're very, very kind people. They also provide this possible aromas and flavors sheet. The purpose of this exercise is not to trick you or to try and put you on the spot. We want to give you guidance as to what is that I can detect. And by running through a list here going, that's it. That is what I'm detecting. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. If you are detecting things in addition to this, then please do incorporate that into your analysis. It could be that if you are working towards your Certified Pommelier for the Certified Pommelier exam, 3 licensed educators will have convened the night before and made their own assessment of the particular cider that you'll be having during the exam. And often there are characters which are identified which don't sit on this list. This incorporates the majority of the key and the most commonly found. But the joy is that there are always new things that pop up. So don't be afraid to put down the things that you are detecting. Okay, so the first chunk of assessment we need to do is the appearance. And we've got 4 elements here: clarity, intensity, colour, and carbonation. Here's my cider in my glass. Now, it's very tricky for you to see, but I can see that there is a steady stream of quite fine bubbles in here. You've got three options. Okay, I'm jumping straight onto carbonation, where I should be starting with clarity first of all. Let's start with clarity first of all. You've got three options in terms of clarity: clear, cloudy, or opaque. If a cider is clear, it can and often is absolutely crystal clear, almost bright and shining. But as long as it is bright enough, clear enough, that you can see the text maybe through the glass, like this, which I can read quite clearly. Or if you were to put your finger on the back side of the glass and you could see your fingerprint through, that would constitute as being clear, even if it's not always crystal clear, although this one actually is crystal clear as it happens. If there was some fine sedimentation, but there was still light passing through, then you would call that cloudy. And if it was opaque, like milk is, let's say, that would lead you to the conclusion that it was indeed opaque, which doesn't happen too often, but it does sometimes happen. Okay, so that's our clarity. Our intensity. Now, this is something that is different to the colour assessment. It's not what colour, it's how intense is the colour which we are about to make an assessment of. It can be quite a tricky one to learn. It took me a long time to really get to grips with it. But like everything, it's just practice. So what you want to be doing is getting your glass and tipping it 45 degrees in front of you so that you can see in the glassware, the actual edge of the liquid starts to bow and it forms like an egg shape. And what you're doing is where the edge of the liquid is there any change in the coloration? Does the coloration actually go pale, a watery rim? That's what we're looking for. If the pigmentation, the colour, extends all the way to the very edge of the liquid, you would say that had a deep intensity of colour. If there is some degree of watery rim, it can be really fine, like a millimetre, let's say. What's that at imperial? An 1/8 of a 16th, 24th of an inch, just like a tiny sliver. Or even, let's say, something more like half a centimetre or more potentially. Then we call that medium level of intensity. In order for it to be very pale, there would almost have to be a retraction of the pigmentation to the center of the liquid as you are looking down into it. Again, that doesn't happen too often. The majority of ciders will present as medium intensity, although you do often get deep intensity, especially when you're utilizing something other than apple or pear, something else that can communicate color, and sometimes those colors are very dark, strong, and indeed deep pigmentation. So that's how we do it. It takes a bit of practice, having that white piece of paper behind, so you can have a look down and it's compared against. So practice. Colour. You're given a few options here: straw, yellow, gold, amber, copper, pink, ruby, purple, garnet. All sorts of things on that spectrum, whether they be, you don't know at this point, because you'll be certainly in an exam environment. We presented these blind, so you don't know whether it's just apple or pear, or whether it's be the addition of something else that communicates colour or any other sensory characteristic. But generally in that sort of pale through to amber, it could well be that we're dealing with apples, and then when we get pinker, it could be that we're talking about red-fleshed fruit or the addition of something else. Here, we're definitely past pale and yellow into gold. Does it go as far as amber? Not for me. It stays in that gold territory. There's not enough of the orange and the brown to take it beyond that bright yellow gold into amber. So this, for me, has a gold coloration. And then finally, from when I jumped the gun earlier on, carbonation. You've got three options here again. If there are no visible signs of any bubbles within the glass, you could make the assumption that it could be a still cider. That is how cider naturally starts its life, of course. In the vast majority of circumstances, it will be bone dry and still, and then something will be done to the cider to give it some sweetness and some carbonation. It could be, if you see one or two bubbles, or there's evidence of bubbling on the top via a mousse, but there really isn't very much, you would say that it was pétillant, so a very light level of carbonation. If, however, you can see very strong evidence that there is a big mousse on top of the glass. So a mousse is a collection of a lot of bubbles on the top. So it obviously did rush with carbonation. And ideally, there is a constant flow. It doesn't have to be an absolute fountain of carbonation, but I can say that there is a constancy of carbonation. We would say that that was sparkling. Now, what you can do is if it is looking like it's presenting still or maybe pétillant, you can indicate with a pencil as to your marking. And then once you have it into your palate, you could make a more informed decision at that point. Go, oh, actually, there was quite a lot of carbonation in the palate. You can go back and you can make an amendment to what your suggestion is. And worth saying at this point before I go any further, please make for any one of these sections where you're given several different options, select only one. If you circle 2 because you think it's on the boundary between 2, you will not get a mark for that. The judges, we want you to select 1. In some very rare circumstances, when it comes to the Certified Pommelier exam, it could be that those licensed educators, the night before the exam went, do you know what, the colour is right on the boundary between these 2. And so they might give you the option of if you selected either one, you might get the mark. But not if you select both. You must only select one answer, always, for everything. Please and thank you. So, this is a sparkling cider. On to aroma. How does it smell? First of all, we're going to look at the intensity. Again, not what are the different aromatic characters that I can detect, but how strong are these? How powerful, how pungent are these aromas? And to do so, we start with the glass at our chest almost, down here. If you are able to detect and identify 2 different aromas with the glass all the way down here, and the aromas are lifting off without swirling, such that you can identify 2 different characteristics, you would say that they would have a particularly pronounced aromatic intensity. Can almost detect something, but for me on this cider, I can't identify 2 different things. So next, I need to bring it to my throat. And just to come around here, we're kind of here. Obviously, we want to give it the opportunity to rise up sort of to your nose. Don't have it completely tucked underneath your chin there. So under the throat here. Again, I'm getting more intensity, but I can't quite identify 2 different things here. So next, so if I were able to identify something here, we would say that this would have a medium plus intensity. Next, we're going in front of the chin. Now I'm able to identify 2 different characteristics. I've definitely got a hay character, and I've got a lovely light woody characteristic. Interesting. Those are 2 very identifiable things that I can now detect. So that means for me, this has a medium level of intensity. If I hadn't got it here, I then bring it to my lips. If that was the point at which I was able to identify at least 2 characteristics, I would say that it was medium minus in terms of its level of intensity. And if I had to get it all the way to sticking my nostrils in, then we would say it had a particularly light intensity of aroma. Pronounced, medium plus, medium minus, light. I hope that makes sense. It should be relatively straightforward. Now on to aromatic characteristics. So now you can give it a good swirl, really good swirl in the glass on the table, and get your nose right in there and write down as many things as you can think of. And you can see you've got a whole range of different primary aromas and flavors that sit in fruit characteristics, and then some herbal, herbaceous, and spice, and a few others as well. Secondary characteristics as a result of some kind of microbiological or biochemical reaction, and then things which would be generally considered to be flaws and faults. At this stage, simply write down and identify any characteristic that you are able to pick out. Okay, let's go. So once again, big hay, slightly earthy, lightly spicy in a sort of cinnamony, nutmeggy way rather than a clovey way. A little bit of light tobacco, and quite a lot of herbal characteristic, dried herbs. twig type characteristics. Those are the key things which are poking out for me. We kind of want you to pick out at least 5 different characteristics in here. You can write down as many as you want. You are not going to get marked down if you write something that you think you can detect, that the licensed educators who got together before the CPE exam and wrote down a list of all the things that they detected. If you write something down that they didn't detect, you're not going to have a mark deducted, okay? So whatever you can detect, write it down. It's absolutely worth it. As many things as you can get. Okay. Maybe a little bit of something called diacetyl. A slight butterscotchy type characteristic in there as well. Creaminess. We'll come on to that a little bit later on. Okay, so that is our aromatic assessment. Now, let's move on to the palate. We've got a lot of things to go through here, people. Are you ready? First of all, we're going to be making an assessment of the sweetness, the acidity, and the tannin level. When it comes to sweetness, you've got 4 options: dry, semi-dry, semi-sweet, and sweet. Something that would be considered dry was where there was no perceptible level of sweetness beyond, you could maybe a hint of something, but it was the dryness that was just dominant. You would consider that a dry cider. Sweet really does, sugar, sweetness didn't really come into it at all. Semi-dry, whereby something where there was a hint of sweetness or contributed to something, but it was very much finished dry. It was a dry, semi-dry cider. Dry was the dominance still, but some sugar component in there. Semi-sweet. This is whereby we've flipped a little bit here, whereby sweetness starts to dominate, but it's not overarching and all-consuming. There is a drying element either at the beginning, a sliver in the middle, or at the end. There's something there which is providing something such that it's not just sweet. And pure sweet is that, really, where there is sweetness at the beginning, at the middle, at the end. There's nothing that you consider would having any kind of drying characteristic in there. Those are our 4 options. So let's have a little taste. There's some sugar, but there's not a lot. And in the construct of the rest of the cider, as we're going to discover, actually the sweetness is quite minimal. It's pronounced, but it's not overt. It's certainly not in the dominance, which means it has to sit in that semi-dry space. There is definitely sweetness, so it can't be a dry, but the sweetness isn't dominating. It's not all-consuming, so it's not sweet. It's not semi-sweet. It's a semi-dry. That's quite an easy one, actually. Sometimes, again, it can sit on boundaries and you have to work really hard. For me, that was actually quite easy. There we go. Acidity. Acidity. Okay, so malic acid is the natural acid that you get within apples. Sometimes within pears, you can get some citric acid as well. This is the briskness, the zinginess, the crispness, the freshness, the sharpness, the tartness, all the different names that is that bit that tingles on the tip of the tongue and runs down the sides and provides that vivaciousness, that raciness, that vibrancy, that crisp refreshment, which is such a hallmark of so many ciders, of course. Now, as well as being able to sort of sensorially detect it from almost from that taste perspective on your taste buds on your tongue, it can be a little tricky when you've got a cider which has got some sweetness in there, because the sweetness can mask the acidity. The way that you perceive the acidity can be altered. The same with the sweetness as well, actually. Where you have higher levels of acidity, the sweetness levels will drop. Where you've got higher levels of sweetness, the acidity levels will drop. So you've got a clever little trick here, is that the acidity also makes you salivate. The higher the level of acidity, the greater the level of salivation that one can detect. So what we're advising you to do is, as well as being able to sort of detect it sensorially on the tongue, is take a sip and then count how many seconds you are feeling your salivary ducts oozing lovely saliva. Yum, 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 yum. The dribble test, as we call it, or I call it anyway. And depending on how many seconds it goes on to, that will help you identify where along that acidity scale it is. Let's have a go. 6 seconds for me. I could definitely feel salivation. By my count, that was 6 seconds. And so if it's 1 to 2 seconds worth of salivation, you would say we have a fairly low level of acidity. If it's 3 to 4 seconds, medium minus. 5 to 6 seconds, medium. If it was 7 to 8 seconds, medium plus. 9 to 10 seconds, a high level of acidity. So that was about 5 to 6 by my count. And so for me, that has a medium level of acidity. There we go. Simple as that. Next, tannin. Now, I come from the western parts of the UK, where our tradition and heritage of making cider is rooted in tannic apples, and very lucky we are that we have this amazing component, like you also have traditionally and culturally in northern France, and thankfully all around the world. Orchards of tannic-driven apples have been planted in North America, Australia, New Zealand, and all over the world indeed. And so what we're looking for here are some key components, largely in the form of astringency, which is the mouth drying sensation, the tongue furring, the gum puckeringness of that mouth drying sensation. Also, tannin can be presented in the form of bitterness as well. Sometimes very light, sometimes incredibly bitter as well. And just going back to that astringency, sometimes it can be there, but it can be very soft. It can be mouth enveloping, but soft. And sometimes it can be really grippy, almost like an espresso as well. So how much tannin are we detecting in this side? There's definitely astringency there. My mouth has immediately dried, but in a quite soft way, not in an overly grippy way. And crucially, there's quite low levels of bitterness here. If there was some bitterness with that level of astringency, I would be saying this was medium plus, but there is very little bitterness there. And so it's just the astringency, which is there. It's not hidden. Yeah, there's a little bit of sweetness there. The sweetness can sometimes mask the astringency, but a little bit. But when you've got decent astringency, it really shines through. That's a solid medium level of tannin for me. It's pronounced, it's there. It's not absolutely crazy. And if it's just lacking that bit of bitterness, it's not taking it further by my count, I would say. Okay, that's our sort of key building blocks: sweetness, acid, and tannin dealt. Now let's move on to flavor intensity. So we did aromatic intensity. Now it's time for flavor intensity. What do we mean here? Well, slightly esoteric, but if one were to think of intensity as a shape on a sliding scale, with a circle at one end being the lowest intensity, gentle, easy, and soft and smooth, and at the other end of that spectrum we had a spiked star. Okay, that would be the most intense. The rounder the flavor is, the less intense the flavor is on the sliding scale. How intense, how punchy is this cider? Good question. Well, we've got a lot of primary fruits, and we've got some sweetness in there. So there is definite softness. But we do have some nice jaggedy elements of the astringency in there too, and a little bit of spiciness. So they're kind of like balancing and trading off with each other, probably so that we're ending up in a medium intensity, I would say. If there was not so much sweetness or fruitiness, it would definitely be higher. And if that astringency was a little bit less, we would be a bit lower intensity. It's kind of a gently spiked, I would say. Medium level of flavor intensity. And then finally, we get on to flavor characteristics. What are the different flavors that we are detecting within here? Now, it might well be the case that you are detecting things which you also detected on the aroma as well. But we will be looking for other things, new things, because of all the new receptors you've got either on your tongue, your taste receptors, or your retronasal aromatic receptors. These are identifying new characteristics which you wouldn't have got on your initial orthonasal aromatic assessment. So we do need new things in addition to those aromas that you detected. So let's see what we get. Well, so we're still into our resinous and spicy dried herbs. The woodiness is actually slightly coming to the fore a little bit more. The hay barn is still keenly there. apple, dried apple, maybe even slightly cooked apple. And then we've got a little bit of, it's mandarin, and it is very much of the juice. There is a juiciness in there, and there is this citric, but it's almost a slightly gently bitter citric characteristic. Looking through my list, there's nothing really in terms of stone fruit. There's nothing in terms of tropical fruits or red fruits or black fruits. Maybe a tiny little bit of minerality in there as well, I would say. But we're very much dominated in our pomme fruit space and our herbal, herbaceous, and spice type characteristics. There is also, again, as I detected on the aroma, a little bit of butterscotch. This is quite possibly down to that it's undergone a malolactic conversion at some stage during its life, where the natural, intense, zingy, crisp, fresh malic acid has been converted by certain kinds of bacteria into a sort of softer, smoother lactic acid, which you find in dairy products. And so sometimes you do gain other sensory characteristics associated with dairy products. Sometimes it can take it down a slightly unpleasant or unsavory route. In this case, it is in this sort of creamy butterscotch. I'm going to note it, and then I'll talk about it in the final assessment. You don't need to state whether you like it or it's good or bad here. You just need to identify that it was there. That's the critical thing. Okay. That'll do for me in terms of the flavor characteristics. Plenty going on here. Next, complexity. Now, there's different ways that one could make an assessment of complexity. The way that the structured sensory analysis does this is we're going to look for all the different rows, all the different buckets of different aroma and flavor characteristics. How many of these did we identify characters within here? Well, I can tell you we had pomme fruit, because I said about the dried and the cooked apple. Citrus fruits for the mandarin. Under herbaceous, definitely the hay. Herbal, dried herbs, resinous, spice, and a little bit of that minerality. And also coming on a little bit of MLF as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That brings us into a medium plus. There's a lot of different characters actually in here. We would generally say if you were just picking up from 1 or 2 different buckets, that's quite a low level of complexity. Only 2 different areas to pull on different sensory characteristics. Even if you had lots of different characters within the same space, that doesn't necessarily contribute towards a great level of complexity because it's broadly in the same space. If we had 3 to 4 different buckets, medium minus, 4 to 5 medium, 6 to 7 medium plus, and 8 plus were into high. So for me, medium plus, there was quite a lot of things going on there. Okay, body. So the body is, how much is it filling the palate? What is the weight or the breadth in the palate? And you can think of it as a bit of a combination between the impact of the alcohol, because alcohol, as well as having the alcoholic effect, it also does massively impact upon the body, the weight, the power of the cider. Sweetness, also an increased sugar concentration within the palate, also helps to provide weight and intensity there. And also the tannic element as well can be quite, provide breadth as well. So how big is this cider? Also consider the interaction of acidity and carbonation, which can help to cut through some of those elements and potentially bring down your perception of them. Given the level of a sweetness and the level of tannin that's in there, we've got some decent body, and I haven't actually looked to see what the alcohol content is, so I don't know. I can detect alcohol there. It's not overt, it's not punching through, it's not dominant, but I can detect it. So that is adding an extra layer. But we're not getting into the realm of it being really full, really massive within the palate for me. So it's a medium level of body. It sits right in the middle, really nicely balanced, actually. Speaking of this, our last element is called the finish. And so what we want you to do here is, once you have taken a sip, is to then think about, once it's either gone down the gullet or whether you have gone into a spittoon, how long are you detecting sensory characteristics which are not considered to be structured characteristics, so not acidity, not tannin, not sweetness, and also not things which would classically be perceived as being a fault. So if there was, some acetic acid in there, or if you detected some hydrogen sulfide or something else which was quite prominent and lasted, but it's not necessarily something that you're considering to be a positive part of the cider. How long do non-structural, non-flawed, faulted parts of the cider last in the palate? Let's have a go. Doesn't last particularly long in this instance. I'm getting the astringency now even. Remember, we're not looking for the structural elements. So I'm discounting that. That sort of herbal woodiness, it shines bright and then it disappears quite quickly. So I'm going to give that a medium minus in terms of the finish. How long is that characteristic, that flavour characteristic lasting for? Again, that's not to say that there isn't a sensory impact. There is from the astringency, from that tannin, but we're not looking for that in this case, in this instance. Okay. There we go. Easy, you see. We've got one final assessment to do. So this is your opportunity to do like a 2-sentence summary of what you thought about this cider in terms of, given everything that you've assessed, how well balanced, how well integrated is it? What's the feeling or the character of this? And noting if there were any elements in there which you would be considering as flaws or faults. So for me, this is a classic tannic forward cider, but with a suitable and appropriate level and balance of sweetness and acidity. There is some good fruit expression, but it's dominated by herbal, spice, and secondary aromas and flavors, including some ML character, some malolactic characteristics. I think it's worth noting the fact that we have got fruit characters, but it's almost not the dominancy. We're talking about herbal, spice, and other elements, and some secondary too. But for me, in this context, as a positive, the light bit of diacetyl, the light butterscotch is providing a softness, a creaminess. Sometimes if that's all you can taste, it dominates and it's very unpleasant. Or if that lactic expression goes more into yogurt or rancid butter or sweaty, cheesy socks, then it's fair to say that is not going to be desired. But in this case, it's there and it's making a positive contribution to me. There we go, folks. That's how you do a structured sensory analysis. And guess what? Like anything else, it's practice, practice, practice. I know it's really tough. You're just going to have to open up many more bottles of cider and run through the sheet and give it a good go. Study tips are beyond practice, practice, practice. Try it with friends. Try a whole range of different ciders. Try to do the assessment in the way that you would do within the certified Pommelier exam, which is blind. If you know what the cider is, then you are definitely going to be led and you're going to introduce some prejudice or bias as to what you are expecting within there. And that might take you down a different path rather than just sort of completely blindly making that assessment. That would be some guidance from me. And then in terms of lots of other resources that you can use, check out everything produced by the wonderful American Cider Association, who are the creators of this CCP program. They've got a YouTube channel, they've got a Facebook page, and of course attend one of the fantastic workshops wherever you are in the world. In North America, there are plenty. In the UK, we are popping up some workshops throughout the year, so just keep tabs with what's going on. And also see it around the world, in Japan, in Australia, occasionally some pop up, in Spain, possibly coming sometime soon as well. So what was the cider? Because it would be great if you want to participate so you can purchase the exact same cider and go through it yourself so that it can be as a closer approximation to that classroom environment. I was drinking, sorry, let's bring it back a bit, Froome Valley cider. This is Henney's dry cider. This is 6% alcohol. You would call it a classic tannic forward Western County style cider. This is available in many supermarkets. You can get it in Waitrose, in Sainsbury's, in Tesco's. It is widely available. It is a cider which has been around for as long as I have been drinking cider, which is professionally and unprofessionally 23 years now, and it is still a great cider. I really enjoy it, and it's a great example of the style and one that is widely available. So thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. Do go and check out all of the resources that are out there. Do go on a course sometimes too. And most importantly, please everybody, keep drinking cider. What's out? Cheers, bye.
Practice makes better. I highly recommend using the resources available to you on our website and in our Facebook community. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to our channel for all things cider education.